The first light of dawn had barely brushed the rooftops of Sagebrush Ridge when Victoria Alvarez woke to the rattling groan of the shop's back door. For a moment, she didn't move. She lay there on the pile of burlap sacks, breathing in the scent of stale grain, dust, and cold iron. Her thin blanket slipped from her shoulders, and the morning chill bit into her skin. She pushed herself upright. The small storeroom behind Clayton's general store was hardly bigger than a tool shed. Crates of canned peaches leaned against the wall. A broken barrel sat in the corner. The wooden floor was splintered, and the single window was so dirty it barely let the sunrise through. Victoria's dress-ons, a pale blue, hung in tired folds, torn near the hem, and stained with the work she did from daybreak till nightfall. Her long, dark hair tangled over her shoulders like an old rope tossed aside. She smoothed her dress anyway. Habit. Hope. Something like dignity. Outside, the front door banged, and she stiffened. That meant Clayton was awake. That meant trouble. A rough voice rolled through the thin walls. "Victoria, you up? I ain't askin' twice." She hurried out of the storeroom and into the main shop. Clayton stood behind the counter, already halfway through a bottle. He was a tall man, once handsome maybe, but years of whiskey and late-night poker had carved deep shadows under his gray eyes. His shirt was wrinkled, boots unpolished, hair greasy. He looked like a bad memory that refused to fade. "You move slow as molasses," he barked, slamming the bottle down. "Get the stall swept, then take that canvas sack and fetch me the herbs from the ridge." My head's pounded. She nodded quickly. Small gestures. Don't challenge. "Yes, sir." Clayton squinted at her, eyes narrowing with suspicion he didn't bother to hide. "And don't you disappear this time, girl. I know every trick you pull." Victoria kept her eyes on the floor. "I won't." He shrugged, already bored. "See that you don't." She grabbed the sack, tied her hair back, and hurried out before he could change his mind. The sunlight outside was sharp, painting long shadows across the dusty street. Sagebrush Ridge was quiet at this hour, just the wind whispering through the cottonwoods and the distant ring of a blacksmith's hammer warming for the day. Victoria walked past the old church, past the watering trough, past all the townsfolk who pretended not to see the bruises on her arms. Folks in Sagebrush Ridge knew Clayton's temper. They knew his drinking, his gambling, the way he treated the girl he called stepdaughter, only when it suited him. But they looked away. People in the West often did. She followed the narrow trail toward the ridge, where the rocks were red as dried blood, and the sagebrush grew in wild, tangled heaps. Her mother had once taught her which herbs could stop bleeding, which could ease pain, which could bring down a fever. Clayton only wanted the ones that killed his headaches from drinking himself stupid the night before. The trail climbed a few more yards. She knelt near a cluster of white-topped yarrow and began to gather it carefully, tying the stems with strips of cloth. That was when she heard it. A low, strangled sound, half groan, half whisper carried on the dry wind. Her heart kicked hard. She rose slowly, scanning the trees. The ridge was quiet except for the buzz of insects and the flutter of a lone hawk overhead. For a second, she thought she imagined it. Then she heard it again. A man's voice. Weak. "Please." Victoria's breath hitched. She followed the sound, stepping between two juniper bushes until the leaves scraped her arms. And then she saw him. A man lay collapsed beside a fallen log, his body twisted in pain. His shirt was torn along the side, soaked nearly black with blood. An arrowhead-shaped wound near his ribs looked angry and fresh. His boots were worn, dusty from miles of travel. His hair was long, black as nighttime creek water, tied loosely at the back. His skin carried the unmistakable warm copper tone of an Apache. His eyelids fluttered as she approached. "Please, help me." He wasn't old, maybe 30, maybe just a little more, but the pain made him look years older. Sweat rolled down his temple. His breath came in short, shallow bursts. Victoria's legs trembled. If Clayton found out she helped an Apache worse, hid one, he would kill her. She knew it, as sure as she knew the sun rose in the east. And yet, looking at the man on the ground, helpless and alone, she felt something in her chest twist painfully. She knew too well what it meant to bleed in silence, to be hurt and ignored. Her voice shook. Hold still. Kneeling beside him, she tore a strip from her already torn dress and pressed it against the wound. His jaw clenched in pain, but he didn't cry out. She mixed the fresh yarrow with crushed sage leaves she carried in her sack, pressing them firmly over the wound to slow the bleeding. You'll make it, she whispered, though she wasn't certain. He opened his eyes again, dark, gentle, searching. Who are you? Victoria, she said softly. I'll help you. But we need to move. Someone might pass by this trail. He swallowed hard. We can't walk far. Her pulse throbbed. She could leave him here. She should leave him here. But she couldn't. She slipped his arm across her shoulders and lifted with all the strength her thin frame could muster. Come on, she urged. Lean on me. He did. Every step was agony, but together they moved slowly down the path, away from the ridge, toward the town, toward danger. Victoria's heart hammered. If Clayton saw, if anyone saw, but she kept going, because the truth was simple. This man needed her, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't going to walk away from someone who needed saving. Not anymore. Victoria's shoulders burned long before she reached the edge of town, but she didn't slow her steps. The Apache leaned heavily against her, his breath shallow, each exhale warm against her temple. Several times she felt his weight falter, as though he might collapse again, but every time she braced herself and kept him upright. You're doing more than any stranger should, he muttered once, barely audible. You're hurt, she answered, her voice thin with strain. That's enough reason. He didn't argue. They skirted around the back of the store, avoiding the main road where Clayton might be lingering. The afternoon sun had begun to slip westward, casting long shadows across the alley. Victoria paused, listening, no shouting, no heavy boots, no drunken muttering drifting from inside. Just a few more steps, she whispered. She pushed open the back door to the storeroom. The hinges creaked loud enough to make her wince. Once she slipped him inside, she closed the door quickly and pressed her back against it, her heart hammering as if the whole town might come charging after them. The man slid down the wall to sit on the floor, jaw clenched with pain. Sweat darkened his hairline. Still, his eyes were alert, sharp even through the haze of injury. What is this place? He asked, voice tight. My room, she said quietly. If you can call it that. He glanced around, the crates, the single torn blanket, the cracked window, the makeshift cot made from stacked burlap sacks. You live here? She nodded. Shame flickered across her face before she turned away. She lit the small oil lamp, casting a flicker of gold across the cramped room. You need more than herbs, she murmured. Let me see the wound. He didn't move at first. There was a certain pride in him. Apache warriors were known for their steel, their physique to show weakness. But after a beat, he slid his fingers up his torn shirt and pulled it aside. Victoria inhaled sharply. The gash along his ribs was deep, uglier in the lamplight than she'd realized out on the ridge. It wasn't an arrow wound. Not exactly. It looked like a grazing gunshot, rough and still bleeding in small stubborn trickles. You're lucky it missed the bone, she whispered. Lucky it didn't tear deeper. He managed a wry smile. Never thought myself lucky. She knelt beside him, grinding fresh herbs between her palms with a practiced touch. "What's your name?" "Isaac," he answered softly. "My people call me something longer, but Isaac will do." Her hands paused for a fraction of a second. Isaac. The name felt steady, grounded, like the earth beneath their feet. "I'm going to clean it," she warned. "It'll hurt. Do what you must." She pressed the damp cloth against his ribs. Isaac sucked in a sharp breath, but didn't flinch away. Didn't curse, just held still, muscles tight. Victoria worked quickly but gently, layering crushed leaves, tying cloth, whispering small apologies that slipped out when his jaw locked in pain. When she finished, silence settled between them, gentle, fragile as dust. "Why?" he asked finally, looking up at her. "Why risk yourself for me? You don't know who I am." Her throat tightened. She sank back on her heels. "Because I know what it is to be hurt and alone." She pulled her sleeves up past her elbows. Even in the dim light, the bruises were unmistakable. Old ones faded yellow, new ones blooming purple and blue. Isaac stared, the lines in his face shifting from surprise to anger, the kind that burns cold. "Who did this?" he asked, voice rough. "My stepfather," she whispered. "Clayton." Isaac's dark eyes hardened like stone. "He beats you?" "Whenever he's drunk, whenever I breathe wrong," she answered, a bitter laugh slipping out. "He keeps me here like I'm something he owns." She looked away, ashamed of saying it aloud. Isaac reached out hesitant, as though afraid she might pull back, and rested his hand lightly on hers. "You don't deserve that," he said quietly. "No one deserves that." Victoria felt her chest crack open a little, just enough for tears to sting her eyes. She swallowed them down quickly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her arm. "If Clayton finds you here," she said, voice trembling, "he'll kill you. And then he'll kill me for helping you." "I won't let him touch you," Isaac answered, low but firm. "You saved my life. I'll protect yours." The words settled in her like warmth spreading through cold limbs. She had never heard anyone speak that way, to her not with promise, not with conviction. Suddenly, footsteps echoed faintly from beyond the shop's front door, heavy, uneven, unmistakably Clayton's drunken gait. Victoria flinched. Isaac stiffened instantly, hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he didn't have. She pressed her finger to her lips. "Don't move. Don't make a sound," she whispered. "If he finds you, we're both dead." Isaac nodded once, slow and controlled. Clayton's voice thundered through the shop. "Victoria, where the hell are you?" She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. "Stay here," she murmured. "Barely a breath. No matter what." Victoria Throsey, pulling her sleeves down to hide the bruises, wiping the traces of fear from her face. She stepped out of the storeroom and closed the door carefully behind her, leaving Isaac in the dim glow of the small lamp. He listened as her footsteps retreated, as Clayton's voice grew closer, louder, edged with suspicion and whiskey. Isaac's jaw tightened, his hand curling into a fist despite the pain in his ribs. He had promised to protect her, and promises to a man like him were sacred. If she called for help, even whispered it, he would come out fighting, wounded or not. Because he had seen her scars, because she had touched his wound with gentle hands, because in that tiny, dusty room, two battered souls had recognized something in each other, something worth saving. Clayton's roar rattled the shelves at the front of the store. Victoria stepped out from the back hallway, hands folded tight in front of her apron, her face arranged into the same careful mask she had worn for years. "I'm here," she said, forcing her voice steady. "I was sweeping." Clayton squinted at her. The sour stink of whiskey rolled off him in waves. "Sweeping? Funny. I didn't hear a damn thing." Victoria lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry." He took one lurching step toward her, boots scraping the floorboards. You go quiet when you were hiding something. Her breath hitched. She could feel Isaac's presence like a heartbeat behind the storeroom door. If Clayton opened it, if he even nudged the hinges, everything would end in blood. I'm not hiding anything, she whispered. Clayton leaned so close she could see the red veins webbing his eyes. You better not be. I hear things, Victoria. Folks say the Army's hunting an Apache around these parts. Say he's dangerous. Say he's wounded. And I can't help but notice you sneaking food out back every damn afternoon. Her pulse pounded in her ears. It's for the stray cat, she lied quickly. The orange one that wanders by the alley. Clayton snorted. You think I'm stupid? No, sir. His hand shot out, grabbing her chin so hard she winced. You so much as feed a stray man, girl, Indian or not, I'll skin the hide off you. You hear me? I'll make you regret ever drawing breath. She nodded quickly, swallowing the fire rising in her chest. He shoved her away and stalked to the counter, muttering curses under his breath. When he finally stomped out the front door, the bell jangling above him, Victoria didn't move until the last echo faded down the street. Only then did she slip back to the storeroom and push the door open. Isaac sat where she'd left him, tense, alert. I heard, he said softly. All of it. Victoria leaned her back against the door and slid to the floor, trembling. He's getting suspicious. I can't keep you hidden much longer. Isaac studied her, worry sharpening his features. If staying puts you in danger, then I'll go. No. She shook her head fiercely, surprising them both. You can't even stand without help, and if the soldiers find you out there... She couldn't finish the sentence. He exhaled slowly. Then what do we do? She didn't know. For the first time since she'd found him, fear tightened around her throat like a rope. Clayton wasn't a man who let suspicions fade. He'd circle like a vulture until he found something to tear apart. Still, she forced a smile. Let me get you some food. Throughout the next week, she stole bits of bread, a slice of salted pork, whatever she could hide beneath her apron. Each time she entered the storeroom, Isaac's face lit with relief, and each time she shut the door behind her, she felt her world shrink just a little more. But in that shrinking world, warmth bloomed. They spoke in whispers, laughing quietly over shared scraps. He teased her gently one evening. You know, this feels like two sweethearts sneaking around behind their parents' backs. Her cheeks reddened. Hardly. I've never been allowed anything close to sweetheart business. Isaac smiled, one corner of his mouth lifting. Well, then maybe this is a first. Despite fear constantly coiled in her chest, Victoria found herself laughing. You're impossible. And yet you keep coming back, he countered, eyes softening. Sometimes, after she finished tending his wound, their hands brushed, and she'd pull away too fast, heart pounding like a scared rabbit. He never pressed, never pushed, just watched her with a quiet patience she didn't understand. Late one afternoon, while the ski burned gold beyond the dirty window, Isaac spoke in a low voice. You saved my life, he murmured, studying her face. No one from your town would have done that. She looked down, maybe because everyone here's too scared to do what's right. He shook his head. No, you're different. You're brave enough to fight for someone who ain't got nothing left. Victoria swallowed. You deserve help just as much as anyone else, maybe more. Their eyes met, and something warm passed between them, something that frightened her in a different way, a way she didn't know how to name. But the warmth didn't last. One evening, just as Victoria finished tying on a clean bandage, Clayton's voice boomed from the storefront. Victoria, get out here. She jumped, almost knocking over the lamp. Isaac reached out instinctively, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Something's wrong," he whispered. She nodded, her stomach twisting. "I'll see what he wants." When she stepped into the front of the store, Clayton stood with two men from town, Jim Harkins and old Porter Tate. Both carried rifles slung over their shoulders. Clayton pointed at her. "Tell them what you've been doing." "Doing?" she repeated cautiously. Jim scratched his beard. "Your pa here says you've been sneaking off every afternoon. Says he thinks you're hiding something." "Or someone," Porter added, lowering his voice. "The Army's looking for a wounded Apache. They sent riders up the ridge this morning." Victoria felt her knees weaken. "There's no one here," she whispered. Clayton narrowed his eyes. "Then you won't mind letting us have a look around?" Her throat closed. No, wait." He stormed past her toward the back hallway. Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Clayton, please." He ignored her, drunk confidence swelling as he reached for the storeroom door. Isaac was behind that door, barely healed, unarmed, cornered. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. She had no weapon, no strength, no allies. But she had one thing left: desperation. She stepped between Clayton and the storeroom, bracing her arms against the doorframe. "You can't go in there." Clayton's face darkened, slow and mean. "Move." "I won't." The room went silent. Jim and Porter stared, taken aback by the sudden resistance. Clayton leaned close, voice low and deadly. "You're gonna wish you never said that." Victoria trembled, gripping the frame harder. Behind the thin wooden door, she knew Isaac could hear every word. And she knew he would come out fighting if she screamed. She just didn't know whether either of them would live through it. Victoria's breath came in shallow bursts as Clayton loomed over her, his shadow stretching across the narrow hallway like something alive. Jim and Porter shifted uneasily behind him, unsure whether to step in or step back. The silence in the store thickened until it felt like a noose tightening around the room. "I said move," Clayton growled, reaching for her arm. Victoria flinched at the familiar threat. But this time something inside her refused to bend. She pressed her back against the storeroom door, trembling but firm. "No," she whispered, "not this time." Clayton's face twisted with rage. He grabbed her wrist and yanked her off the door. Pain shot up her arm, but she didn't cry out. She'd learned long ago that canning only fed his temper. "What's in there?" he barked. "What the hell are you hiding?" Jim stepped forward uncertainly. "Clayton, maybe we don't need to search every corner. The Army might have already taken care of." "Shut up," Clayton snapped. "This little brat's been slipping off every day. She's got something tucked back here, and I ain't letting it slide." He shoved Victoria to the side. She stumbled against the wall, catching herself just before her knees buckled. Clayton's hand closed over the storeroom doorknob. Victoria's stomach dropped. If he opened that door now, Isaac would come out fighting, wounded or not. He'd kill or be killed in the blink of an eye. There would be blood on the floorboards, and she knew exactly whose blood Clayton would try to spill first. Her heart hammered. Her mind screamed. But before Clayton could twist the knob, a low voice slipped through the hall like a ghost of wind. "Victoria." "Isaac." Clayton froze. Jim's eyes widened. Porter muttered a curse under his breath. Then the storeroom door cracked open, not enough for anyone to see inside, just enough for Isaac's voice to reach her. "Victoria," he said again, quiet but steady. "We have to go. Now." Her breath trembled. "Isaac." Clayton turned on her, realization sparking like oil on flame. "You brought one of them bloodthirsty savages into my store?" Victoria shook her head desperately. "He's not, Clayton. Please, he's not what you think." Clayton swung his arm, striking her across the cheek so hard she hit the floor. Jim swore under his breath. Porter stepped back, like he wanted nothing to do with this. Clayton stomped toward the door. I'll kill him first, then I'll deal with. He didn't finish. Because Isaac stepped out. Not charging, not fighting, but standing straight, despite the pain, leaning slightly against the wall for support. His dark eyes, sharp as flint. His bandaged ribs peeked through the torn shirt. But his presence, his undeniable presence, filled the hallway like a storm. Clayton staggered back a step, startled. You. Isaac spoke before he could finish. She saved my life, he said low and even. And you beat her for it. Clayton's face turned a violent shade of red. You shut your filthy mouth. Isaac shook his head once. We're leaving. Clayton lunged for the rifle slung over Porter's shoulder. The hell you are. Isaac pushed off the wall, grit in his eyes, pain burning through every movement, but determination carrying him forward. Victoria, he said calmly, ignoring Clayton's drunken fumbling. Get your things. She scrambled to her feet, her cheek burning from the slap, adrenaline crashing through her veins. She didn't have many possessions, just a shawl, a comb, and the thin blanket she slept under. She grabbed them in seconds. Clayton finally managed to grip the rifle frail, but Jim slapped a hand down on the barrel. Clayton, Jim hissed. You shoot him in your store, you'll have soldiers and the sheriff crawling all over this place. Use your damn head. Clayton jerked the gun free, furious. Head's fine. I'm protecting my property. Victoria froze. I am not your property. Clayton raised the gun at Isaac. Isaac moved faster than she thought possible for a wounded man. He kicked the rifle barrel upward, just as Clayton pulled the trigger. The shot blew a hole clean through the ceiling, showering dust and splinters across the hallway. Porter bolted for the door. I want no part of this. Jim backed away too, swearing under his breath as he disappeared out into the street. Clayton rebalanced the gun, but Isaac grabbed Victoria's hand. Run. They burst out the back door and into the alley. Victoria didn't look back. Isaac limped but kept pace. They reached the hitching post behind the store where Clayton kept his old chestnut mare. Victoria untied the horse with shaking fingers. Can you ride? I have to, Isaac grunted. He swung into the saddle, teeth clenched against the pain. Then he reached down and pulled her up in front of him, settling her between his arms. His breath was hot against her ear. Hold on. She wrapped her hands around the reins, heart pounding like a manic drum. Clayton barreled out the back door, screaming her name. Victoria, you come back here. Isaac kicked the horse's sides. The mare surged forward. They galloped down the alley, hooves pounding, dust rising behind them like smoke. Victoria dared a glance back. Clayton stumbled after them, rifle shaking in his hands. Little whore, you think you can run off with a damn Apache? You think you can steal from me? I'll hunt you both down. You hear me? His threats faded as the horse carried them down the road. The town became a blur of wooden buildings and startled townsfolk. Isaac leaned close so he could speak over the wind. You okay? Victoria nodded, though tears streaked her cheeks. I think so. The air whipped around them, sharp and cold, but it tasted like freedom. Isaac chuckled weakly against her hair. You know, he murmured, we look like two foolish kids running away because their parents don't approve. A laugh broke from her throat, small, disbelieving, but real. Maybe we are, she breathed. Isaac grinned. If this is how young lovers run, I see why they do it. She laughed again, leaning back slightly against him, warmth spreading through her chest despite the danger snapping at their heels. Behind them, Sagebrush Ridge shrank into the distance. Ahead, the open west stretched wide and wild. And for the first time in her life, Victoria wasn't running from something. She was running toward something, toward someone, toward a life she had never dared to imagine. They reached the tiny settlement of Willow Bend, just as the sun dipped below the far mesa sides, bleeding orange light across the skeeth. The town was hardly more than a handful of cabins, a well, and a weather-worn trading post. But to Victoria, it looked like another world altogether, quiet, warm, and untouched by Clayton's shadow. Isaac slid off the saddle with a sharp breath. His legs nearly buckled, but he steadied himself on the saddle horn before helping Victoria down. She hovered near him, hands half raised, unsure if she should touch him. "I'm fine," he murmured. "You're not," she whispered, "but thank you for trying to be." A kind-eyed older woman named May, who ran the trading post with her husband, spotted the pair and hurried over. Her gaze traveled over Isaac's torn shirt, the makeshift bandage, the exhaustion etched across his face. "Lord have mercy," May breathed. "You're hurt. Come inside, both of you, before the coyotes start prowling." Isaac started to protest, but Victoria cut in, her voice soft but steady. "Please, he needs rest." May ushered them into a small cabin behind the trading post. It smelled of cedar and warm stew simmering on the hearth. Victoria helped Isaac onto the cot, while May rummaged through a trunk for bandages and tinctures. Though the woman didn't ask many questions, her eyes lingered on Victoria's bruised cheek. "Honey, you safe now?" she asked gently. Victoria swallowed hard. "I think so." May nodded, only squeezing her hand once before turning to Isaac. "Let's tend to him first. Then the rest'll sort itself out." Days passed. Isaac healed slowly, his fever broke, his breathing steadied, and color returned to his cheeks. Victoria worked beside May, helping grind herbs, mend cloths, and serve stew to travelers. At night, she sat beside Isaac, reading aloud from an old weather-worn Bible May had lent her, though Isaac mostly just listened to the sound of her voice. They settled into a rhythm, simple yet strangely comforting. For the first time, Victoria knew what it felt like to wake, without dread pressing on her chest. One morning, Isaac limped out to where Victoria sat carding wool beneath the cottonwoods. She looked up and smiled. "How are you feeling?" "Like a man who owes his life twice over," he said softly. "Once for the wound, and once for the woman who wrapped herself around trouble to save him." Her cheeks warmed. "I'd do it again." He sank down beside her, wincing slightly. "I know." As the breeze played in the cottonwood leaves above them, Isaac watched her hands move gracefully over the wool, watched the way sunlight touched her hair. Something gentle stirred in his expression. "You belong here," he said. "Not in that store. Not with that man." Her fingers stilled. "I keep thinking he'll come for me." Isaac shook his head. "Not here. Folks in Willow Bend protect their own." Victoria wanted to believe him. She almost did. For a while longer, peace held. Isaac began hunting small game again. Victoria wove blankets for the townsfolk. They shared meals, shared stories, shared quiet laughter, beneath stars that stretched endless and silver over the desert. Then one hot afternoon, when May was at the well, and Victoria was alone weaving in front of the cabin, she heard a sound that turned her blood cold. A man's drunken holler. Slurred, mean, a sound she'd never forgotten. "Victoria!" Her hands froze mid-weave. Her breath hitched. "Clayton." He stumbled toward the cabin, dust clinging to the sweat on his face, his clothes wrinkled and filthy. The bottle in his hand sloshed with each step. Rage burned in his eyes, but beneath it, darkness, guilt, something rotten he'd carried for years. "Thought you could run from me," he spat. "Thought you could steal from me. That horse was mine. That food was mine. Hell, your life is mine, girl." His voice carried across the settlement. People emerged from their cabins, May dropped her bucket at the well. Victoria rose slowly, palms sweating, legs shaking. "Clayton, leave." He laughed, a wild, humorless bark. "Leave. You cost me money, girl. You shamed me. Then you ran off with that filthy Apache like some cheap—" "Enough," Victoria snapped, louder than she'd ever cheered. "Enough." Clayton stumbled closer, words thick with poison. "You think anyone here'll protect you? You think they know who you really are? Tell them, Victoria. Tell them how you lied, stole, played the poor little victim." Her chest tightened. People murmured uncomfortably. Isaac's voice rang from behind her. "Don't take another step." Clayton swung toward him, sneering. "There you are. The damn stray dog she dragged home." Isaac moved to stand beside Victoria, shoulders squared despite the pain still lurking in his ribs. Clayton raised the bottle as if to throw it. May finally stepped in. "That's enough, Clayton. This ain't your land. You've no claim on the girl." "No claim?" Clayton snarled. "I fed her, housed her, and this is how she repays me?" Victoria stepped forward, her anger trembling through her limbs. "Housed me?" She yanked her sleeve up, revealing the old scars, the fresh bruises. "Is this what you call housing?" Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Clayton froze, rage flickering into something like pique, but it passed quickly, swallowed by his drunken pride. "You always were weak," he spat. "You were born for beating. Your mama couldn't straighten you out neither." Victoria's voice cracked, but she forced the words out anyway. "Did you ever once treat me like a human being?" Clayton snorted. "You ain't worth the trouble." A hush fell over the settlements, sharp, brittle, dangerous. That was when Isaac stepped forward, eyes cold as winter creek water. "You're done here." May's husband, Hank, strode up beside him, shotgun resting casually in his hands. "You heard the man. Get." Clayton spat into the dust. "You'll regret this, all of you." But his threats carried no weight now. May crossed her arms, Hank chambered around. Clayton turned, wobbling, and staggered away toward the road, bottle still in hand. The townsfolk watched until he was nothing but a shrinking shadow, swallowed by the distant hills. Victoria sagged, her knees threatening to buckle. Isaac caught her, steadying her gently. "It's over," he whispered. She shook her head weakly. "Not yet." But it was. 3 days later, a rider from Sagebrush Ridge passed through Willow Bend with news. Clayton had been found dead in a ravine outside town, the bottle still clutched in his hand. Too drunk to ride straight. Too lost to save. Victoria listened to the news in silence. No joy, no grief. Just release like a door unlocking inside her chest. She stepped outside, letting the wind brush warm across her face. Isaac joined her quietly, his hand finding hers with an ease that felt like home. The cottonwoods swayed overhead. The sky stretched bright and boundless. And for the first time, truly, she felt unshackled. Free. For a long moment, Victoria just watched the horizon where the rider had disappeared, her hand still wrapped in Isaac's. The wind carried the scent of juniper and warm dust across Willow Bend, stirring the loose strands of her hair. It felt different now, gentler somehow, as though the land itself had exhaled with her. Isaac didn't speak. He stood beside her, steady as the cottonwood trunk behind them, letting her breathe in this new, strange quiet. When she finally looked up at him, his expression held no triumph, no gloating, only understanding. "You're free now," he said softly. The words sank into her bones, but she didn't answer right away. Freedom was a strange thing, so heavy after living without it for so long. "I don't know how to start," she admitted. Isaac's hand tightened around hers, just a little, one step at a time. That evening, May insisted on cooking a large meal to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just warm cornbread, beans simmered with bacon, and slices of peach preserved from last summer, but to Victoria it tasted like a feast. She couldn't remember the last time she'd sat at a table where the air wasn't thick with fear. After supper, Isaac walked her back toward the small cabin they had begun to share. The sky above Willow Bend glowed with 1,000 stars scattered across the deep blue. The night was still, the kind of stillness that felt like a blessing rather than a warning. Victoria paused halfway to the door, turning her face up toward the skeefty. "It feels unreal," she murmured. "Like I'm living someone else's youth." Isaac stepped close, not touching her yet, but near enough she could feel the warmth of him. "This life is yours," he said quietly. "You chose it. You fought for it." She shook her head. "I didn't fight. I ran." "Sometimes," Isaac said, "running is how you survive long enough to fight later." The way he said it made something inside her settle. They spent the next few weeks building a new rhythm. Isaac's strength returned fully. His wound closed cleanly thanks to Victoria's careful tending. Soon he was stringing his bow again, disappearing into the hills at dawn to hunt mule deer or rabbits. Victoria would weave at the loom May had lent her, the rhythmic pull of thread soothing her in ways she hadn't expected. Isaac always left her a strip of dried meat on the table when he returned. Even on days he pretended not to be thinking of her. She pretended not to notice, even though she always smiled when she found it. The townsfolk of Willow Bend came to know her first with cautious politeness, then with genuine warmth. Children ran past the cabin and waved. May talked to her like a daughter. Hank once handed her a sack of flour with a gruff nod and muttered, "Glad you stuck around." And Victoria felt something she'd never felt in Sagebrush Ridge. Belonging. Still, even as peace settled around her, she often caught Isaac watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. As if he were waiting for something, waiting for her to claim the life she wanted. One afternoon, while sunlight spilled golden across the yard, Victoria sat on a low bench outside the cabin, weaving a narrow strip of cloth. Isaac approached, carrying a bundle of firewood on his shoulder. "You've been quiet today," he said. She shrugged lightly. "Just thinking." "About him?" he asked, though there was no judgment in the question. "No," she answered honestly. "About what comes next." Isaac set down the firewood and lowered himself beside her. "What do you want it to be?" She looked out at the hills beyond Willow Bend, the rolling sage, the red mesas rising in the distance, the cottonwoods rustling above them like soft, whispering spirits. "I want to stay," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "Here, with these people. With," she hesitated, her fingers yawning around the cloth. "With you." Isaac's shoulders eased, like he'd been holding tension for weeks. "Then stay," he said simply. She turned to him. "You want that too?" He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her cheek. "Victoria, I've wanted that since the day you carried me from the ridge. I just didn't know if you'd ever want to stand still long enough to call this place home." Her breath caught. Then slowly, she leaned into his touch. His thumb traced the faint line of a scar near her temple, not with pity, but with reverence. "Scars don't shame you," he murmured. "They show what you survived to be here." She swallowed hard. No one had ever spoken of her that way, not like she was something whole, something worth holding. Isaac stood and offered his hand. "Come with me." She took it. They walked beyond the trading post, beyond May's clothesline, to the small meadow edging the settlement. The late-season wildflowers bowed in the soft wind, golden, violet, white rippling, like paint across canvas. Isaac stopped in the middle of the field and turned to face her. "Victoria," he said, his voice steady, "I didn't know where I belonged until you found me bleeding in that ravine. I thought my path ended there. But you pulled me back. She felt tears sting her eyes, warm and quiet. He reached for her hands, drawing them to his chest. You saved my life. Now let me share it with you. She stepped closer, breath shaking. Isaac, we don't have to rush. We don't have to plan every sunrise. His forehead touched hers. But if you want this, whatever this is, I'm here. I'll walk beside you as long as you'll have me. Victoria let out a long, trembling exhale. I want that, she whispered. I want you. I want this life. Isaac's hand slipped around her waist, gentle but sure. The meadow swayed around them. The sky arched bright above. And when he kissed her, it was slow, warm, patient-like. The land itself had been waiting for the moment. When they pulled apart, she rested her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Where do we go from here? She asked softly. He threaded his fingers through hers. Anywhere we choose. But for now, he nodded toward the cabin, its lantern glowing softly in the dusk. Home. Hand in hand, they walked back through the wildflowers, their silhouettes framed by the sinking sun. A light breeze carried the scent of juniper, and somewhere in the fading light, the world felt brand new. For the first time, Victoria didn't fear tomorrow. She welcomed it. And so, under the open western skiway, Victoria and Isaac walked forward, two souls once broken, now whole, building a life carved from courage, tenderness, and hard-won freedom. Their story became a quiet legend, whispered across the desert winds, a reminder that even in the harshest lands, love can grow like a wildflower. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment, so I can keep creating more exciting videos. Thank you all for listening.